All right, well, before we have too much fun, maybe it's time to switch over to what we're all here for, which is the Skillshare. So let's get started. Feel free to keep putting those karaoke songs in the chat though, because it's very entertaining. Yeah, let's get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Amina Shergi. I'm the Director of Resources at the National EMP Network, and it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's Skillshare session. Just a quick bit of background. The EMP Skillshare series is all about knowledge sharing, building communities of practice, and creating speaking opportunities for EMPs. Folks in the NEMPN community are invited to submit proposals for webinars, demonstrations, or workshops focused on an area of their interest or expertise. And this EMP Skillshare presentation is generously sponsored by Drexel University's Art Administration and Museum Leadership Program. Today's
I'm an alum.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. We're ripping. I love it. So today's fantastic session is Best Foot Forward, Writing Professional, Impactful Resumes and Cover Letters. And we've got three fabulous presenters that are going to take us through this workshop. They're all members of the NEMPN Publications Committee. And so I'm just going to introduce the three of these folks here, and then we'll get going. So first we have Adriana Dunn, who is the curator at the West Tennessee Delta Heritage Center. Before this, she graduated from the University of Memphis with a master's in art history and a museum studies certificate. So welcome. Gave a little wave there. Hello. Oh. Fabulous. Next, we have Melody Smith, the current museum curator at the Whale Museum. Great name. Melody graduated grad school in May of 2020. Over 10 months, she submitted 75 job applications, received 20 first interviews, earned 12 second interviews, and accepted 1 job offer. She's eager to share what she has learned through the process. Welcome, Melody.
Hello.
Nice to see you. And then finally, last but not least, we have Michelle Mandula. Did I say your last name right, Michelle? Fabulous. So Michelle is a student at the Savannah College of Art and Design, where she is pursuing a dual master's degrees. She loves creating immersive educational experiences, which has taken her from medical device engineering to product management to technology innovation consulting. Holy moly, welcome, Michelle. Before I hand it off to these three folks, I'll just ask everyone to mute themselves while the presentation's going on. Again, you're welcome to have your camera on. I know it's nice to see some faces when you're presenting, but if you're more comfortable with having your cameras off, that's totally fine too. Yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to our three presenters.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for that very amazing introduction. And I speak for all three of us that we're very, very excited to be here and to be speaking. And we're just really excited and to not only talk about, just the experience of developing resumes, cover letters, but just kind of the real side of it. And this, if we can go even just into it, like we had a preliminary meeting talking about like, how are we going to do this? What's the best way of doing it? And kind of our approach is just to start by saying, like the honest truth of it really. And Melody and Michelle, if you want to join in like that, the program into the professional world of it is very, it's difficult, and we want to be like start off by being open about that. And part of it being is just like the industry that we're going into, it's very crowded, and there is a lot of competition with different professionals bringing a lot to the table. I don't think it's, in my experience, even 5 or 10 years ago, it's not the same industry it was. It's become very different, not only with just more people entering into the field, but also with COVID and everything. It's a whole new ball game. So we're very lucky to have amazing networks such as the NEMPN and other networks. I'm sure that some of you might know, some of you may are kind of still testing the waters too, but really the big thing is that the industry is saturated with a lot of people, and networking is key. And if Melody and Michelle, please jump in at all, but just that's kind of what we wanted to open with, is that it is difficult. It's not just you're not going crazy. So that's a big part of it, and it's a problem. It really is.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just
add a little bit of like a caveat to that, right? So I'm sure if anyone is part of the Facebook group, I'm sure you see posts in there constantly. I feel like I see 3 a day that are something to the effect of, I have been job hunting for insert number of months. I can't find anything. I'm not getting callbacks. Should I go back for another degree, etc. So first, that is also a resource, right? So I would strongly recommend everyone, if you have those kinds of questions or you feel like it's just you, check out the Facebook group. You'll realize that you're like everybody else who's having the same problems. And 2, be really careful about committing yourself to more degree work just for the sake of trying to have that get you a job. If you can do other things to build your network that may land you a job, right? Your network is the strongest thing that is working for you that is not your skill set. So if you're going back to school to add more letters to the end of your name, as opposed to building a whole new set of skills, that may not be the right choice. It may be spend 6 months carving out 4 hours a day to do very informal networking with people, right? Whether that means going and visiting your local locations or finding people on LinkedIn that do the kind of work you want to do and just doing informational discussions with them. But before we dive into resumes and cover letters, right, recognize to Adriana's comment, it is not you, it is the industry, and just be thoughtful about, adding other things onto your plate, whether that be debt or other commitments and stuff, because the job hunt is going to be a little frustrating, and that's something that will likely stay that way as museums continue to rethink their structure and rethink job titles and rethink who they bring back when they do reopen, or as they start to bring more people back, hopefully post-COVID.
And
Anything
I will
else
say,
to add,
yeah,
Melanie?
and I will. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, in general, too, like COVID, the good side of it is at least we're all more accessible now virtually. So you have these like series and lectures and things to go on. So that does help, at least to an extent. I feel like people are much easier of a time to engage with, as opposed to before. It's a lot more in person. Well, I can't go this distance or whatever, but now it's a lot easier. So
yeah, just to bookend what everyone is saying, kind of like, not speaking just for myself, and I think I can speak for the rest of us, like NEMPN is a support system and a resource for you as a person. We're not just like, I'm only interacting with you because you're in museums and that's it. It's like, we care about you as people, whole people who are interacting with GLAM industries. And so if you're going into this process of cover letters and resumes because you are continuing the job hunt in museums, are entering the job hunt, or are even thinking about going with a different field, maybe within the GLAM field, maybe outside of it, we're here for you. Like, because that is a very personal choice and everybody's choice is going to be different. And so, yeah, we support you. That's
yeah, from I think our collective experience as a publications committee, you go on and you're a little nervous to start into it. I don't think I've ever met a more approachable and kind group of people with the NEMPN. Not only our committee, but just everyone I've dealt with has been amazing and super approachable. Amina is just wonderful. I mean, it's just like, it's just been such a great experience. So please like get more involved if you're not with the NEMPN or with other things like that, because 9 times out of 10, especially with museum folks, they're just the nicest, most approachable, like supportive group of people I think I've ever worked with. And in other facets of academia, it's not like that. So I really do. That's why I love working with museums. The people are great. So and so I guess that kind of, we can go into like the fundamentals of writing and formatting resumes and cover letters. So we can kind of start with the fact that, like, so for resumes, and it's different in every, I think the biggest thing really is it's different in every single situation of wherever you're looking for jobs. So first and foremost, like a resume as opposed to like a CV, that's one of the things I really wanted to distinguish with. The resume is usually a document that's one page that really highlights you as a professional. And towards the end, we will be giving our disseminating examples of resumes, good cover letters, and a CV. If you are going in, like for my background, having a CV for a curatorial kind of track career is really great, because you show yourself not only as I design exhibitions and do this, but I also am like really into research and I'm publishing on certain things. So that's kind of why, for like, if you're going into that kind of background, or if you have that background, you're going into that field, that might be a better particular professional document that you'll want to disseminate to future job prospects. So yeah, so for resumes and in general, the good thing is for first and foremost, and as we all talked, is like, it's good to have like really good key things on there, but also stay organized and concise. Don't include everything that you've ever done. So, because that's easy to do. I mean, if you were really, really, you know, arduous in like building yourself up, but you only did certain things for a couple of months, okay, that's great. You did an internship for 2 months, but is it really worth putting on there as opposed to maybe some like a job that you've had for a long time? Like longevity is key in your professional positions and such. You know, if you're showing that you've been at a place for several, like a good amount of time, if you've done an internship that you were there for like a year or plus, is great to put on there, as opposed to like putting a bunch of internships that you're only there for a couple of months. Like, just so know your strengths and be concise about those things and be organized.
When you're thinking about that, you may say, but I have a lot of stuff I want to make sure that I'm including like everything on my resume, right? And we have this tendency to be like, well, more is better. Not necessarily. It's very overwhelming when you open up a resume from somebody who clearly like used, you know, size 8 font, and you can barely read the thing even when you're zoomed in on a computer screen. It's never a good place to put your potential boss or HR team in. So one, be considerate of that. And two, this is a great opportunity for you to think about how you align yourself and your experience with the role that you're looking for. So maybe that's kind of big tip number 2. You should not have a stock resume that you blatantly use for everything, unless you are exclusively applying to one kind of job. And when I say one kind, I mean like one job title that is identical with responsibilities across every institution you're applying for. Yes, it is going to be a little bit more work to custom tailor your resume to every job you apply to, but that will pay you dividends in the end, because it will mean that someone sees, oh, you know, they're going to go look at your LinkedIn. They're going to go look at other things you have available online if you have presence anywhere else. So don't worry about them not seeing all the other things you're doing. They're going to see them, but be thoughtful about what you're putting in front of them first, because that's what's going to get your foot in the door to go discuss everything else that you're wonderful at and have done in the past during your interview.
Yeah, just to jump on that, I have like a whole folder on my computer that says job search, and I opened my resume folder for the first time since I was like actively writing resumes. I have about 10 different resumes, which one for administration, collections, development, engagement, evaluation, exhibits. And so because like if you go through a master's program, you do kind of gain different experience, or depending on what internships you take, or even like what just normal jobs that you had, not like normal jobs, but outside of museum jobs that you had. Like I was a bank teller for a while. So I use that in administration on my resume to be like, I would do 200 transactions a day. I can handle a fast-paced work environment. And so, yeah, it can get numerous for how many resumes you have, but that tailoring will be more effective.
Absolutely. And yeah, the jobs, like, for example, if you're looking into museum education, you're gonna have a very, very different like emphasis on your key professional skills and experience, as opposed to if you're looking for a collections job. Those two are completely different like animals when you're like applying for specific jobs there. So you're gonna want to have, it will be tedious at first, but the work is well worth being organized in that fashion for sure.
Melody also brings up another great point, which is big tip number 3. I'm going to put them in the chat so you guys can see them as we're kind of hitting some of these. I know we're having discussion around them, but big tip number 3, metrics, numbers. You want those things on your resume because everybody can say to some extent, I'm a good team worker. I've done this thing and influenced something, right? But you need to tell people what you've done and how many things or how many times you've done that particular task. And you may say, I don't have access to all the data to tell me exactly how many times I did that in the 5 years or 3 months I worked there. That's fine. Make an educated guess, right? You probably have references that you may be able to ask to dig that information up for you if they're still with institutions where they could do that. But if you don't, make an educated guess. It's a matter of scale, right? To Melody's point, if you can process 200 transactions a day, that tells me that you're comfortable in fast-paced environments, you're comfortable with change, you're really good at understanding how routine work needs to get done quickly and adapting. Those are all things that I can tell from a single line on your resume about the number of things that you can do in a particular day. And that means you don't have to write all those other things on your resume, right? Let your resume work for you and let those lines work for you by putting in numbers when you can manage them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, going into that and just being concise, it's also, and this may seem obvious, but grammar is key. Reread through your resumes, go back, every single time you send a resume, go back and read through it again, because you never know if you had copy and pasted something and maybe, you misspelled something here, or maybe it just doesn't sound as well as you want it to. And this is why I love the fact, like, for what we're doing here is we're giving an option as being kind of peer review readers for people's resumes, CVs, cover letters, whatever you really would like to have reviewed, and giving some advice, some critiques here and there. But yeah, I have a small network of friends and like professional colleagues that are friends that, like, if I need something reread, I shoot them an email, please take a look at this, make sure this looks okay before I submit anything, just because a fresh pair of eyes that aren't so either tired or overly invested in certain things, it's always nice to have that extra look there. So
I love that. Kind of following on that, right? So we've talked about metrics, we've talked about proofreading, we've talked about tailoring. Similar to tailoring, you also want to be thoughtful about how you design your resume, right? We've talked a little bit about this, about making it easy to read. You may say, what does that mean? Like, does that mean I choose, maybe not papyrus as your font of choice for your resume? But say you're going to choose something standard or stock, right? That's fine. But the way you design your resume and lay it out will be dependent on job position and what you're looking for, right? If you're an exhibit designer, I would expect your resume to look very different than someone who's going into administration. Similarly, I'm going to expect there to be white space regardless of what you're doing, right? So we don't want wall-to-wall text. Imagine that when you go and see an exhibit at a museum. You're not going to read anything. If you see wall-to-wall text, it's going to just blur and your eyes glaze over and you say, that's wonderful. Walk to the next thing that you can see that has a little bit more breathing space. So give your resume and experience some breathing space. We love breathing space on a piece of paper, whether it's digital or physical. And if you may say, I'd love for it to not be a huge list of bullets with some bold headers, but I don't know what to do for design. How do I get design inspiration? How do I look for stuff that I love? I have a tip for you. Etsy and Pinterest are full of resume design ideas. And you might have just had your mind blown if you've never looked at that before, but people on Etsy will sell templates that you can fill, but you don't need to pay for them, right? You can look at them solely for inspiration. So check those out. Same thing on things like Pinterest. If you're not finding stuff you love, feel free to search things like the job title you're looking for plus resume example, and you may be surprised about how much you may return that can give you just a little bit of inspiration to kind of jazz up your resume from the black and white stock that it might look like right now.
Absolutely. And so another good key to kind of to follow in general is just be diverse, but and group the same. So if you've been at the same institution for a number of years, but you've had different jobs, you don't need to put the same institution. You can kind of lump them, but organize in an organized fashion, put them all together in one of the descriptions there. It shows that you're not trying necessarily to overfill on a certain thing. Like, you're showing that, like, yes, I've had some longevity at this institution, and I've done I've played many different roles, which I'm sure everybody knows in museums, that's what you do. You wear a bunch of different hats, and that's okay to do, and that's okay to put on your resume, but just do it in an organized fashion to show that you are a diverse candidate. You've done a lot of different amazing things, but you've done them at the same institution, which shows, like, when I go to an institution and I work, I'm there for the long haul, and I've been there for a good while, and I stay. I'm not just somebody here that's going to kind of lily pad at one place to the next, kind of. So that's a good thing to follow as well.
Amazing. Maybe our last two tips on resumes before we jump over to cover letters, right? Because the resume is only half the battle. You have multiple things you're submitting, and it's not just your resume. So tip maybe number, I think we're on 5 now, is thinking about contact information. And that may seem silly, maybe like, duh, I put my contact information on a resume, that's where it goes. They need to know how to get a hold of me. Yes, they absolutely do. We would make sure you're just being very thoughtful about how much contact information you're putting on your resume, right? We definitely want your name, especially whatever you go by. So if you've had name change for last name, or you prefer a different first name than the first name that you're going to have like legally submitted through all the documentation and paperwork that you send them, make sure you note that on their resume, right? Because that's what they're going to call you when they pull that up in front of you on your first screen or Zoom call, is whatever's on your resume. And 2, actual physical contact information like your phone number, your email, maybe your LinkedIn link or some level of other links for things like portfolio if necessary. An address, you want to be careful about if/how much of that you're including, right? If it's unprofessional in terms of like, if you still have an email that is something to the effects of like RoxyGirl67@AOL, we need to find a new email, right? And that can be an email that you set up exclusively for applications. That can be a regular email.
I've done that, and that's amazing. Yeah, good keynote.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So like, right, if you have a personal email that you use with friends and family, great. Set up a professional email that you only use for interviews and for work. It also helps keep your work-life balance better because you can only check it during certain hours or whatever else you're doing. But keep in mind that, right? Same thing with your other links for portfolio or LinkedIn. Make sure those are professional kind of short links. You can customize your short link on LinkedIn. So keep that consistent with the other stuff you're sending them if you're putting that on there at all. The other one we'll quick talk about is phone and address. Phone is probably less concerning, right? Because nowadays with people moving around and retaining cell phone numbers, this is not 2000 where people are going to easily pin where you live based on your phone number. It may actually be a good opportunity to have a discussion about you relocating or something. But address is a tricky one, and just be very mindful if you're including it, mostly because employers may subconsciously disqualify you from a position if they think they have to pay to move you, right? And that sucks. That's crappy, but it's true. It happens all the time. If your employer sees Adriana and me applying for the same position, and it clearly shows that I would have to relocate on my resume because I put in that I'm from Savannah and Adriana's right where they need her for this position, they're going to call her even if we look identical, right? They're going to call her first. And that means they may never call me.
I've heard of HR departments specifically, if you see somebody out of state, don't even bother calling them. And it's so sad because, I mean, and some people be willing to pay for the relocation and say, you know, they have some money saved for that specific purpose if you just ask them, but it's just not the way that they work, unfortunately. So.
Yeah. And they don't know what's going on with your life situation and why you may be choosing to work there. So if you have any doubt, if you may be open to relocating, just don't include your address as like a general good practice, because they'll ask you if they care, right? If they care and you get that far in the process, they will ask and you can sort it out then. Maybe my last note that can then hand it over to you, Melody, is just talking a little bit about skills, right? So we talked a lot about like the kinds of stuff you may want to include for experiences on your resume and how to think about laying that out.
Before we move, I just want to, there's a question in the chat just before we get off the address piece. Is it okay to keep your address if you're only applying to jobs in your local area? Like, is there any strategy to keeping that on?
Yeah, sure.
Keep that on, definitely. Yeah. Highly suggest that. That's more for out of state people, we were thinking, just because of everything that we just discussed. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add from my perspective. So I'm on San Juan Island in Washington State. Like, you have to take an hour-long ferry ride to get here no matter what. And so if you're applying for jobs on the island and you say, I'm already here, that is like 10 points in your column, because everybody has to pay to relocate. Nobody can find anybody for jobs because it's like, we're an island of 6,000 people that every summer swells up to 35,000. And so it's like, I've helped people with their cover letters, and I literally like put on their resume, like, based in Friday Harbor, like, I'm already here. And so that is definitely an example where it can be a huge pro to have your address. It is just entirely situational, but these are just things to consider.
Yeah, I love that. And great call out, good question. Feel free to keep putting them in the chat. We'll happily stop and answer them. But yes, right. So we bring these things up because they're things for you to think about. So think about your address, maybe just don't blindly include it, especially if you're building, you know, a couple of resumes that you're going to rinse and reuse. Fine. But just be thoughtful.
I've seen a few applications like you actually have to go on the online portal and fill out, and they make you do it. So sometimes it is unavoidable and you do have to include that. And I think in the back of my mind, because sometimes I'll just do it, if they're going to discount me just because I live in another state and we're not even going to have that conversation, even though, you know, I would like to consider myself a pretty good candidate and they don't want to consider me for that very reason, maybe that's not a place I want to really work for, you know. So that can happen, but I mean it is a good leg up, and I do agree that is something like make yourself stand out and maybe not taken out of the equation until, you know, and then you can have that conversation once you proved yourself, like based on your merits. Absolutely.
I love it. And you guys are teeing me up amazing. Our last discussion about merits, right? So you're like, okay, I've got all like the check boxes for my experience. They're all action verb starters. They look great. I've got numbers, like check, check, check. This looks amazing. What do I do about skills? Like, ladies, I've got skills. Where do I put them? They're not things that I put here. Do I put them somewhere else? I've got language stuff that I can't put in this area. Skills should augment your resume. And when we say that, we mean do not put skills on your resume that you already have a bullet point for on your resume for an experience item, right? Your skills are and basically an extra place for you to hit keywords. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at the job description that you're applying for, if they have something about a very specific, period in history that they're looking for expertise in, or a particular certification that they really love, and that's not listed anywhere else, or you haven't shown that particular thing off on your resume, put it in your skills category, right? Because this is the way for you to check extra boxes, right? Like Melody said, you get 10 extra points for living close. You get 3 extra points for knowing this thing that I know now don't have to teach you or don't have to worry about teaching you. That's what your skills are for, right? So if they are duplicative of your resume experience, we'd recommend getting rid of them, right? Find other awesome skills to put in there, even if they're soft skills, right? Soft skills are just as important as hard skills in this very human-centric industry. So feel free to include those as well. Anything else, Adriana or Melody, you guys want to chime in, or other questions folks have on resumes specifically before we talk about cover letters, which are the most intimidating thing I think I ever deal with when I'm looking at jobs?
Absolutely. No, I think, like I said, everything is tailored to whatever you're applying to. And like I said, like from my experience and what I'm offering, like, because I've developed the CV part of it because for me, I find like for curatorial, there's a lot of academic like based research and there is an expectation to publish. So I mean, kind of feel out where the job is. If you think a CV might be better for a certain position that you're applying for, go for it and include the CV or have that as a back burner or kind of option there. But in other cases, they might just be looking for a resume and then maybe later on asking for a CV. So diversify yourself by having all of these definitely in your repertoire of professional documents to have, but you can never not be too prepared really for when you're applying for jobs. Like the more and overextensive, the better is what I can't hit more for at home really.
Yeah, I think we are ready to move on to cover letters. If you do have any more questions about resumes, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end. But moving on to cover letters, I really liked Michelle's kind of metaphor about resumes and cover letters kind of being like an exhibit experience. That is exactly the metaphor I was going to use. So I'm going to roll with it. I kind of think in terms of just like the nuts and bolts of cover letters, it really is a lot like exhibit design. You know, the same principles apply. Like the less, that's my cat. Okay. We're rocking and rolling. Sabrina, would you like to get in the chair? Okay.
The cat has joined the chat.
Yeah, entered the chat. Sabrina's here. She has lots of expertise to offer. For like the cover letter, it's exactly like an exhibit label. If it is long, you approach an exhibit label, you're like, I'm not reading this. Like, I feel that way sometimes, even with just like things on the internet. Like if it's too late, I'm like looking at an Instagram post and it is like a paragraph, it's like skip. And so the more concise and is more effective to make sure that your words get read. Like you don't want to have all of these amazing skills and words that just don't even get read. Shorter and maybe less detailed cover letter that gets read is better for you than one that hits every single note that you wanted to hit and is like an entire like page margin to margin. And then additionally, same thing with, you know, resumes that have those action words. Same thing for grammar, like you want really concise grammar. Passive voice, I've been seeing a lot with some colleagues or whatever. Just make really sure that we are using actionable sentences that are empowering to you, because this is about you and getting you to where you want to go and highlight your amazing experience. So let's highlight that even within our sentence structure.
Absolutely.
In terms of the more of the broader thrust of the cover letter, that is more like the development side of museum things, where when you are an institution and you are going to a donor, what you're looking for is an alignment of goals and mission, vision, values. And so it's the same thing with cover letters. This is pretty specific to, I think, the GLAM field. If you are looking for something in tech, I don't think this would necessarily be the way to go. But at least in our field, knowing that an employer looking at your cover letter, knowing that you are personally passionate about their mission is going to say more than if you just describe all of your experience. And so showing them that you personally have an alignment to their mission, vision, and values is going to be really impactful and leave more positive. They will look at your profile more positively because they obviously are working towards their mission, and they are saying, this is somebody who will join our team and is going to be behind us, because you need everybody on board in order to make nonprofit institutions go forward. In terms of explaining your experience, when I first started to write cover letters, I think while I was still in grad school, I fell into a habit of writing down like every single thing that applied to the job description, the qualifications and tasks that they included. And I don't think that was effective at all. And so kind of what I've been doing is picking one example, kind of like what Michelle was saying for resumes. Like you pick one impactful example and use the star analogy, which you can also use in your interviews. And that is situation, task, action, and result. And so if they are looking for somebody who is skilled in community engagement for exhibit development, you say, at this institution, I was tasked with creating an exhibit based off of community engagement. These are the actions that I took to make that happen. And for that result, we had this many visitors, and our exhibit evaluation showed that 80% of people came away learning more, knowing more about the topic than they did when they entered. And that says more than like, at this institution, I did this, at this institution, I did this, at this institution, I did this. That like tells a story, which is going to be more memorable than just like a list of tasks. Exactly like exhibit design. If you create these anchors for visitors to hold on to, then it will be more impactful at the end than just a list of facts and figures and just like fun facts. And then, yeah. So in terms of the structure of a cover letter, I kind of start out with like the thesis of why I'm applying, which is like, this is why I want to apply. These are like, this is why I'm passionate about what you do. These skills augment my passion. I will be excellent for your organization. Go into the second or third paragraph would be like a star analogy. Before, when I had mainly academic experience for museums and then job experience that was outside of museums, I would have kind of a paragraph for both. Like I was saying, like I'm trained in collections management and also in like job experience. I was a bank teller that worked in a fast-paced environment. Recently worked on a cover letter where I just eliminated the 2 paragraphs into just 1 because I thought that was good enough to accomplish both of those goals. So, but I think like 2 main paragraphs, I think that's enough because then you extend beyond 1 page.
Yeah,
And then the
across,
conclusion.
definitely. Yeah.
And then just for the conclusion, once again, like a summary of like, I want to be in this position because my passion and my experience will get you to where you want to go. Just kind of hammer that home for them and show why you have a personal alignment with exactly what they're looking for. That is what I have for cover letters.
Everything I couldn't agree with more. And just to back off of that, or to back onto that really is, one of the things that I find super helpful if you're looking for a museum's mission, just do some research on them independently, go onto their website. Every museum I know for the most part has their mission on there, and just kind of correlate that cover letter to what they're looking for. You know, it's a good reflection. Like if you're making your thesis kind of align with what their mission is and what's important to them, having that kind of reflection, I think, will really drive your cover letter above everybody else. And one other thing I just wanted to we had talked about this when we were developing kind of our key talking points, is it's kind of good to imagine yourself in the role of the HR person, and the fact that like they're reading a bunch of these things. So just think while you're writing and tailoring your cover letter through, how am I going to stand out so their eyes aren't rolling in the back of their heads, and you're actually making an enjoyable experience reading your cover letter, as opposed to something that they've already read 100 times. Definitely.
I love that. Maybe the last thing I'd add before we talk about, tailoring and kind of the other components, right? So we've talked about the big 2, is when we're taught, right? All of these things are fabulous, right? How do you keep this structured? How do you keep this concise? How do you keep this compelling? My cat is also apparently joining in. Apologies if you can hear her in the background. She feels very passionate about cover letters, apparently. But you're also like the other thing to be remembering is the same thing about your resume. Don't give it away, right? Like you have a lot of things to talk about and you have a lot of expertise and great things to bring. Don't give all of your good stuff away before you get to interview with them, right? So yes, you want to include maybe a little bit of a detail of an example that's already on your resume, or tease a little bit of a star example with something that isn't on your resume to add some additional information, but don't use all your good stuff yet. Right? We're happy to talk a little bit about maybe in a different session, kind of interviewing and the skills around that and some strategies around that. But the TLDR is don't give all your good stuff away until they call you back.
I call it the Agatha Christie approach, where you like lead them into and like really, and then you like totally startle them at the end when you get to an interview process. But yeah, kind of, get all those good key star things, but don't give everything up front. Otherwise you're not going to have, everything's already on that paper. What else can you provide? You've got a personality in this and that, but you could totally elaborate on and talk more about and really like set yourself aside. But that's the Agatha Christie tactic. And I'm totally going to just keep saying that because I love that. So
I love it. It's like Melody's analogy again, right? Like it's like the exhibit. You have all the marketing, that's your cover letter to pull someone in and be like, oh, you should come see this thing that's here for like 8 months. You should come see it. That's all your marketing in your cover letter. And then you've got the first panel for the exhibit that is your resume. And then the interview is everything else, right? Don't give all the stuff away. Like don't put the coolest artifact that you're including on your cover letter. That like no one's going to call you back for the first thing that's the coolest thing ever, and they're like, that was awesome, but we have other people who are doing other stuff too, and like we've lost the shock value. Mm-hmm. With that, maybe we want to just talk a little bit about kind of all the other things that are changing and evolving, right? We've talked a little bit about the the state of the place and the area that we're applying in this glam space. But maybe we should talk a little bit about like LinkedIn and the other stuff that helps and working the network. Adriana and Melody, you guys want to talk a little about all these other things that we have to keep in our mind that isn't resumes and cover letters?
I think that the big key, and we touched on this a little bit with LinkedIn. I mean, I love LinkedIn. I love how easy it is to connect with people. I mean, both that you know and just new people, like, oh, this amazing person that's done all these things. So it's literally like having like a digital either CV or resume in front of you. So you get to know them. Like it's like Facebook for professional people, and it's so cool. And I've had great experiences connecting, and that's where, you know, networking is so key, and it's such an easy gateway to do that with LinkedIn. But just be concise on there, because as Michelle was working with that and was talking to us about, people check your LinkedIn a lot of the time too, especially through the hiring process. It's a really important thing to stay concise, and you know, everything that you're putting into your CV or resume, or cover, and even in your cover letter, make sure it all matches every single component. And two, if you have a website, a professional website that you're disseminating as well, make sure it all is kind of under the same realm. Like, so if you're saying like, oh, I interned here, but it's not on, and this has actually happened to me with a job I applied for. One of the reasons I didn't get it is because I had some experience I had on a CV that I hadn't included in like actually like typing up in their portal. And they're like, yeah, if it doesn't match verbatim, we throw it out automatically. That's one of our rules as HR. So I know, I was like, okay, that's good to know. I will do that moving forward. I thought you'd have more space with the CV to add things to, but no, they wanted every single detail, and that was just the way that they go through their hiring process. So concise and everything matching, it's so crucial.
Yeah. I think kind of my what I have to add to this conversation is when I was at the University of Washington museology program, I ran the kind of student group for museological interests, like professional interests. And so one of the events that I put on was like a portfolio workshop, because if we are in the aspect of museum work where we work in a visual medium, we have like exhibit samples, or we have like marketing materials that we can show. A portfolio is a good way to show a potential employer those examples. If you're in maybe like development or something, it might not be necessary, but you can add like a link to that on your resume if it is useful to you. We will disseminate a little handout that I made for that workshop, because we don't have time to go into the whole thing now, but feel free to like email me questions about it afterwards if you have questions, or we can do like a whole separate event on that maybe. But kind of similarly to what Adriana was saying, I did have a job where I was like one of the last two for an executive director position, and not that this was like the disqualifying factor, I don't even think it really factored, but one of the people who was on the decision board was like, there is like a typo on your portfolio. It's like, just to let you know. So it's like weighing whether you want to include that or not, like, because it could be very helpful if it's squeaky clean, or if it has a typo, it's like, well, there's a typo. And so just one of those things to weigh. I'm definitely have been guilty of like sending cover letters that have like a different institution's name on it because I didn't proofread it. So
I've done it too. You know, if you're out of grad school and you're applying to like 10 or 12 jobs, we're human. We make mistakes. I'm sure in some cases it works out, but other people, you know, that may be the breaking moment. But that's why a fresh set of eyes, have that person or that colleague that you can, yeah. But I've done it too. I've been guilty of that. So guilty as charged.
I love it. I think that may be it in terms of kind of super clear stuff for you guys on cover letters and resumes. I think we've got maybe just a little bit of advice from people who have gone through the work to try to find jobs that are perfect for them and have landed those for Adriana and Melody and are just thriving in the work that they're doing, from folks who are currently looking for work or have looked for work and have got stuck in the weird place of glam where they're like, should we pay you for that? I don't know if we should pay you for that. So maybe we've got just a couple of quick anecdotes about that. And then we'll take any other questions people have. So Melody, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, in terms of kind of like relating to what Adriana was saying, like an HR department has this mellifluous rule that only they kind of have reasoning for. There are no rules for resumes and cover letters. We had tips to give, but everybody who's going to be reading your resume and cover letter has like their own set of standards. There are best practices, but somebody may have some ridiculous, like, if you don't live within the city limits, I'm going to like throw out your resume. We can't control for that. We can only just try our best to appeal to the widest market that we can. And also in terms of that, in that there are no rules, I feel like museums and the glam field is very specific. You can't write a resume and cover letter if you were applying to like Microsoft to be a programmer than if you were applying to be a curator at a museum. It's two completely different wheelhouses. The employers are expecting different things. And so, yeah, I would just kind of be cognizant of that. If you're like looking up like resume tips, who are they applying to and like what field and industry are they thinking of? Because everybody has their own different standards. Even I think Adriana and me both being curators, I did not need a CV. And Adriana, from your anecdotes, it made it sound like you did need one. And so
I definitely, and like a lot of the jobs I've seen, at least the curatorial jobs I've seen or have been interested in, they want like publication experience. They want you to list your exhibitions. So if you are doing that, and that's why I use the CV, like, or the CV that will be passing out. I have the publication that I've done finally got published. That's so no, should be another. Thank you. It should be another tip thing because that's a whole nother animal. Be very patient is the best thing I can say about publications. But if you've got that, some exhibitions, and then if you come in like for an interview, you can reflect on that. Like, let me bring in like on my iPad, a small PowerPoint presentation of some of the exhibitions I've done, you know, just to really heighten yourself. But every experience is going to be different. If I want to go 5 years down the road, I'm like, I want to switch to education. Well, I should really look at the lesson plans that I've developed and maybe bring in like a printout of the lesson plans I've developed for our Hatchie River region room, you know, like that kind of thing. So it's going to be different in every ball game, but yeah, it's really good to have, you know, if you have a circle of friends like in museums and you have someone that's in collections, it's good to kind of talk back and forth and maybe get some advice. And I think that's why it's so great to have such a diverse group here talking. You know, even if there are two curators, I know we have two very different jobs and have two very different experiences. And then all the great work that Michelle does, we're all bringing something different. And I love that. But it's good to have these, and that's where kind of full circle back, it's good to have these networks with people that are really amazing, super, you know, receptive to questions, inquiries, all that kind of all that amazing work. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of this, and it's good just to keep on with that and to make connections for sure.
Love that. Maybe the last thing I'd add is, and Melody had mentioned this up front, I think Adriana's brought it up a couple of times, but we're also like, NEMPN is here to support you even if you don't stay in glam, right? We know the job market is hard. It's probably one of the hardest spots it's been in a while, and that's okay, right? We get it. Like, you have to pay bills, you have to put food on the table, you have to have ends meet, and that may not be through glam right now, and that's okay. Right? Great example. So I worked, because I'm in grad school right now, I took a unpaid internship. We will not tell everyone that I worked on the unpaid internship stuff. I'm trying to make that a not real thing that we have to do anymore, right? But that was me last summer. I was working 3 other part-time jobs to pay for the fact that I was taking an unpaid internship. And that was the reality of what I had to do to get my foot in the door. I did that and ended up getting contract work out of it. So I did exhibit design work immediately following my internship that they actually paid me for, which was great, right? But that meant that I had to figure out how to pay the bills while I was waiting for them to pay me in the summer and the fall. So keep those things in mind, right? If you have to get scrappy about working other stuff to get your foot in the door, or really go and network the snot out of whatever organization you want to work in, do those things. But we're here for you, whether or not you choose to stay in glam, or if you're like, dude, I can't do it right now. Like, I need to go find work that actually pays me a living wage, or helps me put more food on the table, or helps me move, or whatever else you need, or pays me enough so I don't stress about this for 80 hours a week because I can't put food on the table as much as I would like. That's fine, right? That's fine. Sometimes that's the reality of it, and that's okay. And we're here to be supportive of that regardless of what that looks like. But come back and ask us questions when you're looking to get back in the field. There's lots of other great things that are adjacent to glam, right? You may want to go work in teaching. You may want to go work in zoos or galleries, or as an adjunct professor, or in marketing, or nonprofit work, or in technology. All those people have a lot of the same skills that you have. And some of them may give you a little bit better flexibility or whatever else you need right now. And that's okay. That's totally fine. We're happy to talk to you about that too. If you're like, I'm having a crisis and I can't do it, that's chill. Let's work through your crisis together, and we'll find you something that works while glam isn't working for you right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. On the same note, like Amina said at the start, I graduated in May 2020, and I did not get this job until April of 2021. And so we were in Seattle, me and my husband. Once our lease was up, we moved down to my hometown of Vancouver, Washington, lived in like a house with roommates that was actually like my friend's family's house. And I just like applied. Those like 75 applications was during that time. And it was getting to like October, and I had interview after interview where it was like, there's nothing wrong with you, but we have multiple great candidates and we had to choose one. And so it kind of got to the point where I had to make money to live. And so I had to take a temp job. And it was just like data entry in a COVID lab, like literally 8 hours a day. I just like pick up a sample tube and scan it in and put it in a little rack. And that was a really difficult choice because it was like, I have a master's degree and I'm going to be doing data entry for a temp job. And like, while in a perfect world, we would all have like the perfect egos and like the perfect humbleness to be able to go any way that we can. That was a really difficult choice that I had to make to be able to pay rent. And while I was still in that process, I was still like applying to jobs. And even that got a little bit too much. It's like, I can't take this rejection. And I took a little break, like of a couple weeks, instead of like going home every night, checking all these job boards. I was like, I need a little bit of time. And then after I came back from that break, there were 2 jobs. I applied for both. I got interviews for both. One of them was the job that I'm in now. I don't want to say that if you take a break, you'll find your job. That's not what I'm saying. But like, you have to make choices that are best for you. If you are able to stick it out and you feel like it will be worth it for you, then we want to be able to help you to do that. But if you say, I cannot do this, I need to adjust somewhere else, we support you. But just my experience, I hope you can take something positive from it.
I think you've got a great experience because you're open and honest, and everyone wants to pretend like, oh, I worked so hard and I got a job right out of this. No, it's really not like that. I mean, and for me, from between my undergrad and my graduate, I took a few years off. I played the role of sugar mama so my husband could go to grad school. And that was some of the most enjoyable like time in my life, like just not having to worry about that, kind of recollecting myself, like, what do I want to do? And then when I went back, like I went back full steam ahead and worked my butt off through my grad program and then got a job out of it. And I was really fortunate. I mean, I busted my butt, but I was really fortunate to have worked with the people I did and network and all that good stuff. But I took 2 years off, and that was a really, really great experience just to kind of focus and like kind of configure what you want to do. And that was a great experience in my whole lifetime as well. So I get and I agree with both of you.
I love it. I think we're done sharing like work really hard and it'll maybe work out. Like we can't promise it will. I hope it does for everybody. Everyone on the call, I'm sure, is wildly talented and it should work out for you. But
absolutely, and we're trying to help with if it's not through this conversation, with the documents that we're passing around and all that. So
I love that. With that, I was going to say, if you want to take us off speaker view, you're welcome to do that. And then we're happy to answer questions if anyone's got them, and we can share the resources and stuff. Feel free to blow up the chat if you've got a bunch of questions that you're like, I've been sitting on them and I need to ask. Like, let's answer them.
Before actually we get to the questions, if it's okay, because we're getting close to the hour, I want to make sure that you folks have access to two really important links. So the first is the Google form where you can upload your resume and cover letter, because our facilitators are so graciously offering to review anyone's resume or cover letter who has attended this workshop. So I'm going to first put that link in the chat. It's a Google form. There's also some questions just about your experience with this workshop to help us plan future programming. So that's the first link. And then the second link I'm going to just add now are the resources, the Google Drive folder with the resources that our facilitators have so graciously assembled for us. So feel free to access those. And I hope you can stick around for a couple minutes to ask any questions you have. I'm going to unspotlight everyone so that it can be a bit more conversational. Feel free to unmute yourself or feel free to throw your question in the chat.
I'm going to include my email in the chat box. So go ahead and you can just email us whatever you want to talk about too. Yeah, but we're definitely glad that you're here.
And I think if I could just jump in and say what I really appreciate about the three of you is how you started this with like in a place of compassion, recognizing that this industry is hard. There's no magic formula to building your resume to get the job that you need. Everyone here is deserving of employment, of being able to meet your needs and being able to do something that fulfills you in terms of like your work life. And this is so helpful to be able to like unravel some of the mysteries behind what people are looking for in resumes and cover letters. But at the same time, it's like, it is a lot of work to do this, to put your resume together and to put yourself out there and then to face
it's like being put under a microscope. Yeah. And that's so hard. And like the rejection after a while, it's like, gosh darn it, like, why am I doing this to myself? So, yeah. But it's not you. It's so many, it's a number of factors, you know, it's the other applicants, it's the institution, you know, it's not you. You are doing an amazing thing by applying and putting yourself out there. So kudos to anybody going through the application process anywhere. It's a tough process. And I have, my heart goes out to anybody, everybody going through that, because it can be really difficult.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Eva, for being a part of our group.
Yes.
Yeah, like there was an interview that I had that it was like all on Zoom and it was for like a 6-month position. It was like an NGO that had 2 people. And so I interviewed with like the one guy. He was like, okay, I'm going to like move you to my partner because like I'm really excited. I want to move forward. I had a great conversation with her. She was like, oh, I'm like really excited to work with you. A couple of days go by and they like send me a rejection. And I was like confused, but who knows? I was like, if you have any like tips for me to improve in the future, I'd love to hear it. And the response I got was just wild. It was like, you seemed really serious on our interviews. And that made me feel like you didn't care about what we're doing. So like, you seemed really cold in the interviews. It's like, it was not the experience I had. And also we're talking about like solving race relations. And so I'm kind of confused how I'm supposed to be like upbeat about that. So it was just wild. But yeah, like you don't know what's going on. Like you can just try your best. And whether that is like how that's filtered, we can't control that. And that was like the most wild email to receive. But like these things happen. You can't control people's responses. And that was just a 6-month position, but obviously I kept applying for something and was able to get something like full-time year-round. And so, yeah, you just never know.
Yeah. You never know what you're going into. It's a gamble, really. I mean, it's a total gamble on so many different factors. So like, I can't say enough, like as much as you can't or like control the situation of like your emotions, if that makes any sense, just try really hard not to take it personally, you know, I mean, because if it doesn't work out and maybe that's just kind of the fate kind of person in me, it wasn't meant to be, and you're learning it now, as opposed to getting a job and then being in like a really toxic work environment that you didn't really ever want to go into to begin with. So if you think about it that way, I feel like it's a lot better and it's a lot easier, and it's nothing personal towards you. It's just the way of it, you know?
Yeah,
So.
like I was saying, like I heard over and over again, like I had to find the most nitpicky thing to differentiate between two candidates because things were so tight. And that was super frustrating. It's like, I'm 25. I can't just magically be 35 with 10 years experience. Like I can't. And so, but.
And coupled all that with like the trauma of what's happening with the pandemic, like for those of us that lost their jobs because of it, those of us that are like facing additional hardship because of it, or just really not being able to find work because of it, it's just like, oh, it's so heavy, you know, it's so hard to navigate. So yeah,
We're all here for anybody who needs it. We're happy to review whatever you guys submit. So if you're like, dude, I got my resume on lock, I don't need you to look at it, but like, please look at my portfolio, or please look at my cover letter, or like, what is a CV? Adriana, help. Like, submit that stuff to us, right? We're happy to look at the other things. If you're like, this thing, I'm not worried about, I got that one, that's fine. I've had 58 people look at it, but this thing is concerning.
Just, you know, in a reflection, and hopefully we can have a discussion about it later, like a separate presentation night. But if you want to talk about like going into before your interview, if you want to talk about some of the things, I mean, I'm happy to jump on a Zoom with somebody if they want to go over a couple of things, like anything I can do to help, because I know how stressful that is. I know you're like literally kind of put on a chopping block kind of feeling, like when you go in for the interview and you don't know what to expect. For the most part, my experiences have been really positive. I've never like had anybody be like super attacking or insulting, thank goodness, but I've also heard horror stories, and yeah, so anything we can do to help, we're open, we're happy to be here, and I really appreciate this experience from my side of just hearing people's stories or trying to help in any way that I can. It's a really great feeling, and I really appreciate that.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this going to be made public by any chance?
This
The
recording,
yeah.
yes, it will. It'll be in the coming weeks. It'll be put onto the NEMPN's YouTube page. So you're welcome to revisit this. You're welcome to share this with other folks. Yeah, this will be made public.
Awesome. Thank you.
We've got a question in the chat as well.
I was gonna say, I see that from Clara, and oh man, do I have a million opinions for you on this one. But my big one is, all experience is experience. So I don't care if you got paid for it or not. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I have had amazing people that I've worked with that have gotten paid $0 for a bunch of the stuff they do. Stay-at-home moms don't get paid for all the things that they do for their family, and look at all the skills they're developing, right? So there's a reason a lot of employers have moved to just experience as the section title on the online application, and that's because they don't care what your payment was for it. So 100% yes, please include all that good experience. It is going to help you stand out, and especially in the glam world, that volunteer experience means a lot to people, because that is also good backup for like, hey, I really care and I actually want to do this for a living, because I'm happy to do it for free, right? We don't want everyone to have to do it for free, but that's a good additional way to showcase that on top of all the other things that you're doing.
Two things I can say about that really is what we were discussing through the presentation. Just make sure it's tailored towards the job you're going for. So if you have like several collections, but then some education, and maybe you did some marketing or something, but you're applying for a collections position, probably stick to those collection based, unless these other jobs might have had some things you working with objects or doing those types of tasks there. But yeah, just make sure that they are tailored towards the position that you're going for. And don't be afraid if you have more, like if you're fresh out of a program or you're getting back into museums and you have way more volunteer experience rather than professional experience, that doesn't mean anything. You can have a CV or a resume or whatever that is equally amazing, if not sometimes better, because you did all these wonderful things, you just weren't paid for it. That hasn't, so like if you're volunteering a bunch, or if you have volunteered a bunch, but you don't have as much work experience there, well, I think in a lot of ways it shows, again, like what Michelle was saying, is that you are super passionate about the job that you want to go into, and that really just strengthens you as an applicant.
I have nothing to offer. I've never had any luck with application portals. So
I finally made it through one last week, and man, did it feel like the best thing I've ever had happen to my entire life. I literally
It's
have no
possible.
idea. It happens. You will be shocked when it happens, but it does happen. So yes, so keep an eye out. I would also recommend maybe around that for application portals, if you are applying to a larger institution that uses a portal, one, just be mindful of how you're formatting your resume, because that like weird stuff happens when you import a PDF into those sometimes. So just like double check that weird things didn't happen when they imported bullet points. Yeah, I hate them too. But the other thing I'd recommend is when you're thinking about those portals, check your spam folders. Your spam folders may actually filter out a response if they send the response to you through the portal. People are getting better about not doing that, right? They'll have the hiring manager actually like direct email you. But just keep an eye out, especially if it's like a big organization that you really would love to work for, right? Which is hopefully who you're applying to. But just keep an eye out on that. Check your spam folder like once a week, because sometimes weird stuff gets sorted into spam. Like I'm a runner, and my running stuff gets sorted to spam. I'm like, yo, how many times do I have to mark this like not spam for it to be a real email? So yes, it does happen, but yes, please include your experience. Thank you.
Just for the sake of the recording, I'm just going to read out the question that was just answered. In those application portals, would you put volunteer/unpaid experience in the employment section if they don't have a separate place for it? And that was a wonderful discussion for that. So thank you so much.
Still the bane of our existence though, but.
So we've passed the hour, so I think this is a great place just to wrap up. If you have any more questions, the facilitators have put their emails in the chat, or you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm at resources@nationalempnetwork.org, and I can forward it to these lovely folks, as I have the great pleasure of being on the publications committee with them. Thank you so much to you three for that wonderful talk, that wonderful presentation. Thank you for your labor, for your heart, and for your expertise, and for the offer to review people's resumes after the fact. That's just such a fabulous service that you're offering today. So thank you so much. Again, I'll shout out that survey if you don't mind filling it out to give us some feedback on today's session. It'll help us plan for the future, and that's also how you can upload your resume for review. Keep posted for our next month's Skillshare, where we'll announce it on the Mighty Network. We've got a great session in the works, so keep an eye out for that. I'm also going to put the NEMPN Skillshare YouTube playlist in the chat for you. So that's where you'll find this recording and our other great Skillshare sessions. If you're interested in leading your own Skillshare presentation, you can submit your ideas to this Google form I'm putting in the chat. We welcome like diverse topics. We really want to hear from all sorts of folks and all sorts of areas of museum practice. So please feel free to reach out and send us your ideas for your own topic, for your own presentation. And lastly, if you're interested and able to support NEMPN's various initiatives, you can visit our website to find links and where you can donate or you can shop our merch. We're so grateful for any support that you can lend us so we can plan great programming for the future. So I'm putting that there.
Do you know if the museum advocacy day, workers advocacy day, is still available, or is that a pre-order only? Do we know?
For the merch?
Yeah, the merch.
I feel like it's still available.
Okay. I got the one that has like all of the departments on it. And I just walked around my workplace, like going to my coworkers, like, this is you, your department on my shirt.
Oh, that's so cute. Yeah, we got some good stuff there.
That was good.
Yeah, so fabulous. Thank you so much, everyone, again. It was so lovely to see you. And thank you again to our fabulous presenters. And I hope to see you all at another Skillshare in the future. Have a great night.
Amazing.